I've learned a ton so far, Nicole and Sara. I know our viewers, based on our emails, have as well. So thank you both.
Absolutely.
Nicole, let me start with you. Just a general question about businesses overall. And we touched on this a couple of weeks ago, but I wanted to really get into it. What should they do to protect themselves when it comes to cyber threats?
So a couple of weeks ago, I was in a professional development session where an FBI agent who is in cyber talked about thinking like a criminal. And I think that businesses have to step outside themselves and kind of put on that criminal thinking hat. What do I have that a cyber criminal wants? And think through their assets, as in what would prevent my business from functioning? What do I have that they could take?
You're talking about like if they say attack your software, if they can get into your email, or those vulnerabilities?
Exactly. So that's why it's important for the business to do what's called an asset inventory. They have to know what they have in order to protect it. So when we're talking about what a business has in asset inventory, we have to look at things like databases. We have to, of course, look at the server, the hardware, but you have to look at it in terms of the databases that the organization has, the actual data. Most organizations forget to think that their data is very valuable, and without it, they can't function every day. And what about cell phones? Employees most days have cell phones and the data that's stored on those cell phones. So you have to have a comprehensive list of what the organization has, and once you get that list, which takes a lot of work to derive that, but then once you get it, you want to rank those assets from most critical to least critical. And the reason this is important is because you're not going to offer the same level of protection against a more critical asset compared to a least critical asset.
The whole time Nicole was answering the question, Sara, I was getting fearful for our small business friends who watch and thinking, okay, what if their online presence is minimal? Do they need to take the steps? Do they have the vulnerabilities that Nicole was outlining?
Sure, Brad. I think that's something, when we talk about big businesses, they obviously know they have databases full of information, credit card information, PII from their customers. But smaller businesses, I think,
what's PII mean?
That's personally identifiable information.
Okay, thank you.
And that's something that we have to be aware of. That's things like your name, your birthday, your social security, your address, anything that identifies you in the physical world and is tied to your identity. So that's very sensitive information, and big businesses understand that they hold that and they have to protect it. But a lot of little businesses, like you said, if they don't have a lot of online presence, maybe they don't sell anything on a website, maybe they really don't even have a website, they don't feel like a cyber attack or the information that maybe they do hold is targeted. But that's really a misconception. So if you think about a brick and mortar store, if you've ever been into one of them, sometimes they ask for your birthday, right?
Yeah.
They get your address, your birthday, your phone number, your email, and they put all that down, and it's for good reason. They want to be able to reach out to their customers, let them know when they have promotions, send them a birthday update. But that's that sensitive information, that PII, that belongs to their customers. And so if they're keeping that, let's say it's a very small business and it's on a spreadsheet on a computer that they use, that spreadsheet is really just a tiny database sitting on a computer that is vulnerable and it could be exposed. So that sensitive information still has to be protected.
All right, so what's the role of the employee then, Sara, when it comes to limiting that exposure, when it comes to making sure that they're not part of the problem? They're just, we're just the worker bees. What can we do?
So when it comes to employees, obviously education is the key, but what businesses have to do is understand their organization. So depending on the size of your business and what you do, what your business function is, you're going to have different categories of employees. Some of them might be folks like accounting, HR, right? Sales, and then you have your IT staff. So a lot of businesses and the employees in them think, well, it's the IT or my IT security staff that need to be worried about this. But really everyone has to take some ownership for cybersecurity.
Yes.
So you have to target training at the different groups of employees that you have, and it has to be relatable and relevant to what they do. I wouldn't give highly technical training to your sales or your HR staff because, you know, they're not going to be working on databases and on you know, devices like routers and switches, things that run the network.
Right, we won't.
That's the IT staff, right?
So Nicole, what's that look like on a day-to-day basis? Does it look like classes or experts being brought in, or do we all take a day off from work and go to the Georgia Cyber Center? How do we be better protectors of our information?
So I think it's important that businesses have an inside training awareness educational program, but they also need to be connected to an outside resource, which is one of the reasons I'm very passionate about working for the Georgia Cyber Center and the Cyber Workforce Academy, is we have the opportunity to deliver affordable, relevant training to security and IT professionals. We also aim to raise awareness in offering of field trips, speaking engagements to businesses, organizations, and offering information to the public, which is what we're doing on your show here today.
Is it expensive? What the Georgia Cyber Center offers?
Compared to our industry partners, no.
Yeah, I would imagine it wouldn't be.
And that's why, again, I said I'm so passionate about it, was because everybody doesn't get the opportunity to extend the service that we are extending.
You know, y'all have made me, I don't know if paranoid is the right word, but fearful of everything I do online. You know, last time we talked about making sure that lock was in the address bar to make sure that you're on a secure site, that the HTTPS appeared. What can we do, Sara, from the minute we get to work and log on to make sure that our habits reflect our desire to keep our company's info safe?
So I don't want you to be scared, Brad, but I want you to be cautious.
Yeah.
The internet it's something that was built that it created a very trusting environment for people. You get an email and you trust that person because you know them has attached something that you need to read. So if you go back to where it started in the 90s, we didn't have all these threats. So fast forward to now, we're still too trusting. And even for those people that are cautious, we have to you just have to keep your wits about you and be aware of the threats. So something that I recommend specifically for all users, and this is something you can take home, but is also important for employees at a business, is to be aware of social engineering. That's one of those very, very common vectors. It means it's a route in. We talked in previous shows about emails and how that's a way that they get in, phishing emails. Well, it extends past that. It's not just phishing emails. Vising, which is voice solicitation, is another form, and actually it's so prevalent.
You're talking about when someone calls you and you feel like you're talking to a
Yes.
legitimate human?
Yes, and it's happened to me personally, it's happened to family members of mine. You get a call, and usually the premise of these is, you know, I'm with Microsoft, or I'm with your internet service provider, or I'm from the company you bought your laptop from, and you have a virus or something's wrong with your computer, and I'm going to help you fix that because we don't want you to be, you know, in harm's way. So a lot of times that's where they're pushing these consumers to maybe go to a website and download something, but that thing that they're downloading is a tool that allows that hacker, because it's not really Microsoft calling, to come in and, you know, collect your information, spy on what you're doing. So it's important that, you know, users understand, and that's just one instance. Those companies, antivirus services, Microsoft, they don't call consumers directly, right? It's just like the IRS scams that we saw in email. The IRS doesn't usually send emails because they can't verify if you got that email. That's why they use the postal system.
This is probably a whole show unto itself, and I'll ask either one of you. I want to go to break and talk about a lot more cyber issues when we come back, but before we do, I think I've asked you this each time. What are these bad guys after, whether it's at the business level or the individual level, once they get our information, name, birth date, social, our company's secrets? What do they do with it? How does it benefit their wallet?
Well, you can sell the information. For example, we talked about PII. A lot of that can be sold or used because I can open credit in your name. Now, obviously, the mitigation for that is keep your credit frozen and only unfreeze it when you want to actually open a credit line,
Right, I love that advice.
Yeah. But stealing identities is a piece of that. When we talk about intellectual property, that's huge. When we talk about companies, that can put a company out of business.
They can sell it. There's a market for it.
Absolutely. Sell it to competitors.
All right.
Cyber espionage.
Cyber espionage is real, it exists, and you do need to protect yourself every step of the way. What about ransomware? How much of a threat is that? It's one of the topics we're going to tackle when we continue to look at cyber issues as our special series on the Means Report continues. Welcome back to the Means Report. Nicole, Cliff, and Sara Rees from the Georgia Cyber Center walking us through a lot of cyber issues, especially as they relate to businesses and employees. And Nicole, we promised the viewers we would talk about ransomware when we left. I always thought ransomware was something that hit your home computer. You had to pay somebody to give you your information back, or else they made a virus destroy your computer. What is it, and how does it impact the business community potentially?
So think of it in terms, most people can relate to someone being kidnapped and that person being held hostage, and there is a ransom offered against the release of that person. So normally the bad guys would ask for $100 million or $100,000 in unmarked cash. So there's a form of payment offered against the release of the kidnapped. So what's happening in the cyber realm is the data is being held hostage. And the attacker offers a ransom against that data, and the how they're holding it hostage is they actually encrypt the data with a special key and make the data unreadable to the business. And they tell the business you have to pay a ransom in the form of a digital currency called Bitcoin. This could be 100 Bitcoin, which is equivalent to depending on the market, $400,000 to $500,000. And so they say, if you pay us this ransom in the form of digital currency, we'll release your data. We'll give you the key to unencrypt it. The sobering statistics associated with this type of attack is that a ransomware attack in 2019, a business can fall victim to that every 14 seconds.
This sounds like something from a television show or movie, but it's happening all the time.
It absolutely is. Healthcare institutions are not at the top of the list for this type of attack.
What are you supposed to do if it happens, if you're the victim of a cyber attack? It sounds like it could devastate your organization. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but what's the initial response if you get hit?
So the first thing anyone should do if they're a victim of a cyber attack, and this is the same for if you're talking about your home network versus a business network, is look to try to contain it. So some types of malicious software can spread without any intervention. What you want to do is immediately remove any computer that you suspect to be infected from the network. So that means unplug the network cable, not the power cable, or disconnect it from the wireless network that it's connected to. So that stops the virus from moving through the network to other connected PCs, laptops, mobile devices. Then the reason I say don't unplug the power is because if we're talking about a business setting and you have the resources either in-house or you're able to call someone in to do forensics or incident response, you can actually lose evidence if you power the computer down. Some of that evidence is volatile, so by leaving the computer on, it gives those specialists the ability to see some of the things and help recreate what happened, maybe get a better idea of what was compromised. So again, contain the scope by disconnecting that machine. If you have something where there are credentials involved, so for example, a password, an account was compromised, those immediately need to get changed. And be very careful using the network where there was a compromise until it's been thoroughly inspected, because just because you think you've only had this one computer that was a problem, if you don't know about another computer that's been infected and then you go and do something critical on that computer, you could be increasing the damage. So first is contain it. Next, once you have the ability to get an understanding of if there was any information stolen or compromised or exposed, you may, as a business, have the responsibility to disclose that to your customers. So I talked about PII. If you had people's information and that was lost, you have to. It's the law.
You have to tell them.
disclose, right.
And many of us have gotten those letters and those emails.
Yeah.
Nicole, we've talked about educating our employees when it comes to cybersecurity. We've talked about the proper response if you are attacked. What about our assets, our data, our information in our companies, our formats that everything's on? How can we maybe take some preventive measures to make sure if we do get hit, those areas are less vulnerable?
So we just talked about a ransomware attack, and a ransomware attack is an attack against the data. So if I have backup copies against the data, that's a great mitigation control. It's not a fail-proof technique, but it's something that we recommend. And
backed up on a computer or backed up on a disk and put in a warehouse?
Both.
Okay.
It could be both. So there's a very easy rule to follow. It's called 3-2-1, and that's we recommend to a business they have 3 independent copies of their data, and 2 of those copies should exist in different formats. So they could be on another computer or an external hard drive, but at least one of those copies in the 3-2-1, at least one of them needs to be off-site. Because many times what happens with a business is if they store all of their backup copies on-site and something happens and the on-site location is compromised, they're not able to get access to that data in order to be able to restore their systems.
And have you found that is a way that helps most businesses restore their systems, that they can just plug those copies in and recover, get back on their feet?
Well, it is a professional recommendation, but again, it's not foolproof in that if those backup copies aren't being tested, then the business could run into some issues when they go to restore, because maybe they're restoring on a different type of computer with a different application software that has a different update that could cause some issues with compatibility of that data and it being readable. The other side of that, again, something different than ransomware, is that organizations should perform vulnerability assessments. And this is basically, you could have an outside entity, a third-party resource, come in and perform some vulnerability testing to tell the business where they're vulnerable, where their risks lie. And of course, once you get that information, you want to action against those items, take some protection measures.
I bet your businesses would be surprised if they had that assessment done, how vulnerable they are. So what if they do get hit, Sarah? How do you even begin to recover? You've painted a devastating picture, and especially for the smaller companies. What do they do?
Especially when we talk about the smaller companies, Brad, unfortunately it is very devastating. There's a statistic that says about 60% of small businesses that are hit with serious cyber attack go out of business within 6 months.
That's the worst. They get hit, no fault of their own, and they close.
Right. So it's something where a lot of small businesses, they lack protections or they lack attention in that area because they say, well, I'm not sure that that's really necessarily something that's going to impact me, and even if it does, I just don't have the resources.
Right.
But right now where we are, you don't really have the ability to not do it, right? It's too much of a risk. So there's things that you can look at, like Nicole mentioned, vulnerability assessments, knowing what you have so that you can prioritize the resources that you do have against those assets. But there's things out there like cyber insurance, which again, it may not be something that a very small business can look at, but as your business grows, it's something that helps with that recovery period. So oftentimes it's the cost of recovery that cripples small businesses. So that can be offset. A cyber insurance policy is sort of like your car insurance policy, where if it's a fender bender and fixing it is less than your deductible, you're just going to fix it, right?
Right.
But if you total your car, that's where you need that insurance to step in and help you with that recovery cost. So that's how cyber insurance works.
Are the days of downloading Norton antivirus and going along your merry way over?
I think for a business, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot more out there. Yes.
I love what you said, though. I mean, when you're planning, let's say you're planning to start a business, and you say, well, here's my budget. Oh, oops, it doesn't include cybersecurity. You might not want to go forward, right? I mean, you can't afford not to have this.
You know, something that I recommend, Brad, a lot of, especially your small businesses, if they have an IT person, a lot of them say, well, I can't afford to hire a full-time security person too. That's okay. Give that IT person the skills they need to help offer the protection and assess where you are. Give that person the training. There's a lot of smaller institutions that You know, your IT folks wear that second hat of security, and that's absolutely okay. We can't get stuck in a mindset that I have to have a specific dedicated person with that role. That can be a responsibility that someone else has, you know, on top of IT, because that's going to make it something that you can actually do. You can empower that employee and get your business off on the right foot.
A quick check of how we're doing in this region. All we report on Channel 6 all the time is how this is just the cyber capital of the world, and we have all these people moving here. Are we churning out the experts to tackle some of these issues that y'all have described? Are we doing a good job of giving people to plug into the workforce?
Yeah, I absolutely think we are.
Yeah.
We have a lot of great programs at Augusta University, at Augusta Technical College. We have students in our building for both of those programs. We have professionals coming in. You know, my only concern is making sure that the K-12 space, all the kids like in the middle school area, are aware of what cybersecurity is. We do a lot of work with kids and teachers to make sure that they're aware of the opportunities and the types of skills that are needed in that field, because there's a lot of misconceptions. They think it's just sitting behind a computer and coding all day, and that's not it.
They do. You're right. They think it's just coding all day. There's a lot more to it. Nicole and Sara, thank you for what you do to educate everybody out there and to educate us here at the Means Report. We appreciate you. The Georgia Cyber Center is a rich resource when it comes to all things cyber. You heard Nicole and Sara talk about what they can do in this community to better educate us and to help your business stay safe. If you have questions, email them. There's the address on your screen. Our next installment is coming up on June 2nd and 3rd, where we will continue to learn about all things cyber. Business owners, big and small, I hope you learned a lot today. I know I did.